Hello everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. No, I'm just kidding. Shout out to Benjamin Cohen though for the idea today. I actually didn't watch his video. I just saw it said like Bitcoin cycles, and I thought that is a great topic. Now, I did a little homework this morning. I didn't actually get as much done as I thought, but I still think it is a great topic. It's relevant, and almost no matter how you cut it, unless we are looking at something different, we're wrapping up the cycle here. Now, it's always possible that we're seeing a longer cycle, or maybe the cycles are broken down, or this will happen eventually. The only thing that I'm 100% confident about when it comes to these cycles is that they will not last forever. I don't have a date of when, but they will not last forever. At some point, it just can't be that clean, right? We see this in trading in markets. When everyone is expecting something, markets always do the opposite. So at some point, this basically has to break. I will say that we really haven't heard this rhetoric before. Last cycle, or in 2021, we didn't have people talking about the 4-year cycle ending. We've always had people say, this time is different. This time, you know, we will do something else, right? We'll do something else. But we've never had the specific 4-year cycle break rhetoric, which is interesting. It's something to consider. I think there's a lot of factors on the table that could influence the 4-year cycle that logically are arguments that we should see something different, but we actually haven't seen anything different yet. This will really take into next year to definitively say the 4-year cycle has changed or is broken or whatever. It's going to take, I'd say, well into Q1 of next year before we can make these claims. But why not be familiar, or at least brush up on what these cycles have looked like? And so what we should maybe at least not even anticipate, but have as a guide looking forward. So that's the goal of this episode today. I appreciate you guys tuning in on a Monday. You're all the best. If you could, really quick, just smash that like button, subscribe, hype up the stream a little bit, get the energy flowing. We'll have some itchy, scratchy brain rhythms maybe later on in the episode, but I'm going to keep it music free just for now. So where to start? The 4-year cycle is a logical application of thought to Bitcoin. This is the entire history. Crypto's history obviously is this history plus, I don't know, like 2015, 14, we started seeing kind of things with market caps that maybe influence the total market cap, but largely we'll look at Bitcoin. And so even this is going to be the first question. In order to answer, what does the 4-year cycle show us, and is it still intact? We need to define it. And it sounds like an easy task, but it really isn't. You can do this in many different ways. For example, the way I've always done it, and there is no correct answer, by the way. This is the way I've done it. People have done it other ways, but the way I have always done it is basically by cycle highs. I've done it by all-time highs. I think they're the most memorable, the most emotionally impacting, and in many ways, the most important events that happen in the 4-year cycle. We see some kind of all-time high. I just realized that if we see a 4-year period go by and there's no all-time high, then the 4-year cycle is broken. That's some good FUD. Anyway, I've always done this high to high. I think this makes sense, but I'm not even really going to argue that the other ways don't. I think that they're all valid, and which one is best, I'm not sure. Of course, I use mine just maybe out of simplicity or even out of habit. It's just what I'm used to. So that brings me to a very easy conclusion. I look at all-time highs. I look to the next all-time high. What we find is that is about 4 years. And when I say about 4 years, it is incredibly close to 4 years. From let's see, we don't even have one at 2009, 2010, because that's when we started trading. And if we view it this way, I think we have one kind of pre-cycle, 2, 3, 4, and now we're working on number 5. If we kind of just extend out number 5 the same amount of days, we will find that we are really close to the end of this cycle just based on the previous cycle. So actually, how many days passed before this? Because Bitcoin existed before 2010. It'd have to be like 2009 and change. I don't know. Maybe that's a silly task to try, but we'll say like 300 days maybe. Maybe we need to draw this back to the beginning of trading, and then it looks a little more similar. We see like a shortened period. Perhaps we should draw that differently. Perhaps it needs to go back to when Bitcoin originated, not when it started trading, or we have data. But then in between there, at least from 2013 to 2017, we see about 1,500 days. A little bit less, a little bit more. Depends how you draw it. From our 2017 high to our 2021 high, we get about the same thing. It's 1,400 and change, right? When I say at least a 4-year cycle, I'm not referring to something that is literal to the day. I'm not saying exactly 4 years from now on the day, that is going to be like the next high. I think that that's a silly concept to expect to be true. And I think it's a silly concept to try to apply, but it's roughly, it's pretty much, right? It's in the same zone. And over the last 2 cycles, at least, we have seen a very close together all-time high to all-time high to 4 years. We look at that out from 2021. Where was it? I guess we do it this way. And let's see, 30, 61. Maybe we'll put it at 61. That would bring us to November of this year. Let's do maybe 1,500, right? That's December of this year. I think the best way to look at it through the lens that I do is the all-time high should probably be in this quarter. And that is something that I have been vocal about here. Haven't made a secret. Been really expecting this, honestly, since, I don't know, 2023, 2022. Bitcoin has been very predictable in this sense. But you definitely could argue that this isn't the correct way to do it. There's validity to that. And maybe you even look back and you say, well, look at this. This doesn't really fit, right? No matter how you look at it, this doesn't really fit. You have to bring it back to here. It's 12. What do you need? About 300 more days, like 10 more months, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, all the way back there. 10 months before July. I don't know. That actually might be pretty close to when Bitcoin started. Anyway. There's other ways to look at this, and I think there's something to them. So I think another measure we could do is we could measure all-time lows, so the bear markets, 2 bear markets. I think that makes sense. When we look at that, we can also say, well, those are really impactful times. Those are really emotionally charged times. They do happen to come about every 4 years, and so that's an equally valid way to look at it, I would say. Let's see what that looks like. We're getting really close. It's interesting. The mathematics, the symmetry of Bitcoin has been mind-boggling, right? This gives us a little bit different outlook. What you'll see is, again, from the 2012 to 2015-ish time, we have a little shortened period. Then from 15 to 18, 1,430 days, which is what? About 4 years, right? It's almost exactly the same as high to high. When we look at it from 2018 into 2022, we get the same thing. In fact, this one is even closer. Instead of it being about 60 days off, this is only 1 day, give or take a week. These are weekly candles, so it's not exactly one, but this is 1 day roughly. I think there was a leap year day in here, and that's why it's 1 day extra. Almost exactly the same. So this doesn't give us anything to look for the all-time high, which is probably what we want to find, right? Logically, this should be coming up soon, almost no matter how you look at it. But it does give us maybe information about an event that is far off in the future. An event we don't want to think about right now. The bear market bottom, right? The next cycle. If this 4-year cycle continues, the next bottom would be perfectly on time yet again, right? October of 2026. So a year from right now. A year from right now. That lines up pretty well with our history. I think this is a valid way of looking at it as well. It can give us some insight as to what needs to happen between then or now and then. Well, we need to see the end of the cycle. We need to see a top. We need to see potentially price move down, and then we will be looking at the end of next year for some kind of cycle low. The same way we're looking into the end of this year for a cycle high. I think both of these work. But they're still not the only way you can look at it. So this is something I'm trying to drive home here, is the 4-year cycle is not something that is perfectly defined. It's not something that you can look up in a Webster dictionary and find the definition of. This is something we've all kind of put together over time. It was really only popularized. Actually, this is really important. A lot of people out there newer to crypto likely not aware of this, but this concept of a 4-year cycle was really only popularized, I would say, at the end of the last cycle. Maybe the end of the last cycle and possibly into 2019. Before then, people weren't really talking about a 4-year cycle in the same way, and we can see why. It didn't really exist. The next topic that we'll bring into this 4-year cycle concept, we'll string this together a little better, but it didn't really exist. We hadn't had a perfect 4-year cycle kind of looking back and saying, oh, yes, that's always happened. Yes, of course that will happen again. We didn't really have that. We had kind of close 4 years here from June of 2011 into November of 13. Maybe you look at it this way from this low. I don't know. This didn't fit perfectly. This was a little shorter. And what's interesting is this is kind of shorter almost in all of the ways that you could view this. And I'll get more into that in a little bit. So this concept didn't exist as much. And it only existed in the next way we can view this cycle. The next way we can view this cycle is another mathematically built in 4-year, we call it a timestamp, a landmark keystone, right? And that is the Bitcoin. I'm gonna Google this. Halving dates is the Bitcoin halving. The Bitcoin halving is every 4 years, except for, with the exception, and this is gonna be kind of cool. The exception of there was one halving that wasn't quite 4 years, and you'll never guess where that was. Back here. It was the first halving, but getting ahead of ourselves. This is likely where the 4-year cycle was derived from as a concept, and likely where it was derived from even as a as a saying and as something that people would expect to be the motivator, right, for this to be cyclical. Every 4 years, there's a deflationary event. It's scheduled. We can tell when it will happen far out into the future. So traders, miners, everyone in the ecosystem is aware of this. They can see it. They know when it's going to happen, and they can plan around it. And that's exactly what has happened since the beginning of Bitcoin, really. Let me pull up these dates so I don't get them wrong. The most recent was also the strangest, and one that deviates from the previous, at least when it comes to what we're familiar with. And that was May of last year. The reason that it was different, as many of you remember, is it was the first halving, at least in this view, that had an all-time high, that had a new higher price than the previous halving, than in the period, the 4 years before it. So we have May, that was the first one. So this was a sign, this was something that happened a little different than the last ones. I think that's like the best piece of evidence that anyone can have against the 4-year cycle. Whoa. Whoa, Crypto Face, my guy. What's up, brother? My guy. I love this man. I love, no homo, but no homo. I said it, but I love this guy. You guys know Crypto Face. What a G. Top G right here. Haircut looking good. Yeah, this is a little fluffy. I'm doing the Gen Z, the fluffy front end. Crypto is a scam, gold over crypto. I actually have some gold stuff pulled up that kind of chimes in with this, gets into that idea. Where was I? The halvings, right? So let's look back. We have the most recent halving, of course, we're all familiar with. 2024 in, was it May? Is it in April? Why does it say April? I thought it was in May. Maybe it wasn't in April? It doesn't really matter, actually. April, May. Either way, we had broken all-time high. Oh, it was May in 2020. That's why. Look at me. Look at me getting old, forgetting the old dates. All right, so we have May of 2020. Let's throw that on here. Boom. Let's go back before that. July of 17. Damn, those are. It was back like when I started crypto. Oh, way back there. Then we go back to 2009. Oh, 2016. Yeah, like that doesn't make sense. 2016 in. Oh, this is okay. 2016 in. There we go. I was gonna say that doesn't sound right. There we go. These dates are the European way of doing the dates, and I won't lie, it's confusing the shit out of me reading these. And then November of 12. Here we go. November of 12. So here's another way of looking at this 4-year cycle, right? Is in between the halvings. The halvings are roughly always 4 years apart. The first, this was the first halving, right? The first halving was a little bit shorter, obviously, because Bitcoin began in 2009, and then its first halving was in 2012. So that was a little bit shorter than 4 years, which is interesting because all the other ways we measure this 4-year cycle, we see this one is a little shorter. It's a little quicker. It's compelling. It's important info. We can look at it this way. I think this is valid as well. The next halving should be roughly March of 2028. 2028. Let's move that out. Can I even get there? Yeah. March 2028. There we go. We can look at the 4-year cycle this way. I think that this made sense until this era, until we had the cycle, until we had the halving in April of last year. This made sense. I've never done it this way. As I'm doing this and saying this out loud, I'm like, huh, why haven't I done this one? Why not? It makes sense. I think I'm going to stick with my original argument. Is like, all of these ways are valid. I don't think there's a specific perfect way to do this. The one wrench that gets thrown in it, obviously, if you do it this way, is we have a strange one. We have a strange cycle. And maybe we could say that that actually was the breaking of the 4-year cycle, right? If you go by the halving as the cycle divider, you could say that this is broken in some ways because it wouldn't be what we've seen in the past. Actually, that's kind of cool. Maybe this is the way I should have always done it. Maybe I'm learning with you guys, right? So at the halving, we had seen no new all-time highs since the previous cycle high. And afterwards, we had moved on to that all-time high, right? It actually looks very similar in the past. We have the high pulls down, retraces about half the way, trades sideways, and then blasts to the new high. And that is actually not really what's happening anymore. It was there in 2020. We were about halfway, about 10K, 9K, about halfway from the high, and blasted off to a new all-time high. And then this cycle came, and it isn't the same. It's not the same. It's definitively not the same. We were past the high. I think exactly during the halving, we were like at 60, 65, whatever. And afterwards, we actually moved down for a few months before kind of crawling back to a new high. Okay. I've never really heard anyone make this argument, which is weird because it's so easy. It's even like a lazy argument. It's like the 4-year cycle is different or broken because we had an all-time high before the halving. Interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think? That's kind of cool. There's obviously even more that we can do and we can say about this. Even more. We could look at the cycles through even a different lens. This is the last one that I'll do. We could say, okay, the cycles begin, and this one's a little bit more fit. This one's like, you're fitting this data a little better. We can say when Bitcoin breaks its all-time high, that can be the cycle. And that is roughly, again, every 4 years, right? It's that just below 1500 day mark. Right here, we see it again and again. This one is just a little quicker. A little bit quicker. Yeah. Wait a minute. This is kind of cool. Maybe it's a blessing I didn't have enough time to do all the homework, because now I'm vibing. Now I'm in the zone, catching cool stuff. So from all-time high to all-time high, technically the all-time high was broken here. And then from that to here. Interesting. This is hella interesting. Okay, so if we go from all-time high break to all-time high break, which is another, I agree, totally valid way to do this. What's interesting is it isn't the all-time high in price. It's not the peak of the cycle. It's not the trough or the bear market low of the cycle. It is vaguely related to the halving, but is actually its own unique thing. what is cool about this and interesting is we actually are seeing, and I believe this is one of the only lenses to view this where this is happening, we are actually seeing this speed up. That's cool. From 13 to 17, that's the 1430-day mark that we have seen repeated in almost every different way we've looked at this. That is just about 4 years. From 17 to 20, we see about, not 100, but close to 100 days shorter, 1370, 60 days shorter. But then from 20 to 24, 1250, that is without a doubt shortening. That's kind of cool. Let's see. Let's apply kind of this same idea to the next one. Let's give it, it's about 100 days shorter. I don't know if we should go 100, 150. Let's go 150. 150. If that shortening continues, not only will we be looking for an all-time high before the next halving again, which would rhyme with the last one, it could even come in, what, May of 27? That's weird. May of 27. Nah, I guess no, that's still 3 years. It's still like 4 years, right? How's that still 4 years? I was off by 1 month. Hold up. April of 27. I'm still off by a month. It's March. There we go. It's still close to 3 years. Damn, no, that's like 3 years. We've been talking, and I know everyone's aware of people saying diminishing returns on our cycle highs, and that is what we've seen. Almost no matter how we look at it, that's what we've seen over the years. But one thing that I don't think I've heard people really talk about is maybe a shortening cycle, keeping those diminishing returns, but maybe over time remaining kind of in line with what we've seen due to shortening cycles. Now this asks or begs the question of like, well, if that continues, Tom, doesn't that mean eventually everything is kind of backwards? And I would agree. If that were to continue happening, things wouldn't really look right. I don't know. The other ones by definition would have to fall apart. If we kept seeing about 100 days shorter on cycles, eventually you're having all-time highs to all-time highs, like multiple, right, in between halvings, in between 4 years, and that would break the other ones. Huh. That's kind of cool. I'm into it. I'm into it. Where was the 4 years from the low? About there. So if all of these were to happen at the same time, maybe this can be the cool finale to this thought, to this discovery on a Monday. This will be bare bottom. Giggity. And then we will say 4 years from the high. This will be November of this year, will be the bull top. Bulls and bears, also gay. Bull top. Let's do that. Bull top, bear bottom. And then potentially all-time high, break of all-time high. I don't know. That's not a lot of time for a lot to happen, but it's a cool thought. It's a cool thought. I like this. This kind of combines all the ideas. But then when, all right, the last one is the next halving is in 28. So that all could happen a year before, 11 months before. 11 months before the halving. Cool. Remember, the halving is the only one here, all out of all these lines, that we know with confidence, that we are 99% sure that the halving will happen in April of 28. Nope, March of 28. I keep doing that. Stupid European time. It's getting me, dates are getting me all screwed up. This is the only one we know with confidence. Of course, it could happen, it could happen in February, it could happen in April, but it will happen within a few day period, and we already know that with incredible confidence. This would be cool. What if, I guess the bearish way that this would go, right, is like top is in. Maybe we get tiny little peak, top is in, bull market, bear market bottom, and then what? Boom, like a rocket, rocket back. That'd be crazy. That'd be actually crazy. And then halving. I guess the halving in this example wouldn't really like play into it, wouldn't really line up. I don't know what happens after that. Huh. That'd be wild. What do you guys think? I have more that I wanted to say. I don't know what time is it. Yeah, it's 1:40. I've been talking for like a while. 20, 30 minutes. That's pretty good. What do you guys think? What are the odds of this? We'll look at gold and stuff next. Why isn't BLX updated since August? That's a good question, bud. That's a great question. And in NHH993. Sorry if that's not usually your name. I don't know what's going on with I have no idea what's going on with YouTube. Why are our streams like this? Is CryptoFace still here, bro? Is this happening to yours? What is this? These are your YouTube tags. Like your tags. They're different from your YouTube username, or they can be. I see it in like half of the streams I look at. You're quicker? See, that's what I mean. I was complaining in our YouTube group. There's like YouTube partner creator group, right? And the one guy who's like kind of the guru guy, I was like, is anybody else seeing this? It's really annoying. And he's like, what does it matter? And that's very much his vibe, because that's what he does. He's a good guy. I get a lot of great knowledge from him. He's like, what does it matter? And I was like, well, I guess it's not a big deal. But, you know, when you live stream, I'm going to take a screenshot of this. When you live stream, mainly like recognizing people and, you know, communicating, connecting with them is important, and it does hurt that a little bit. Like, I didn't know you were quicker. You're NHH993, right? That's weird. I'm going to send that to him. So let me see. What do you guys saying? F your sideways generational wealth. Why isn't the BLX charted? Okay, that's what you're saying, quicker. I don't know. I have no idea. That's a good question. Oh. Here's your answer. Which is really weird, because this still doesn't answer it. Okay. This still doesn't answer it, but this is the answer to it. Notice of service termination on September 1st, 2025, which is not yet. Oh wait, yeah, it is. That was last month. Where am I? Where do you go, Tom Grant? Where do you go sometimes? On September 1st, so that's why August into September it was ended. The Brave new coin API went offline. You can still view historical data, even though the BNC charts will no longer be updated. That is a big bummer, and I wonder why. I'm gonna have to look into that. We'll have to look into that. I wonder, it couldn't have been a super expensive endeavor, right? It's not like updating an index for Bitcoin is like one API is super expensive. I don't know. Okay, what's up, Bullish Mike? Trump announces SBR. November midterms. What's SBR? What's up, Orhan? How you doing, bro? Real based South Asian. How are you, man? If this is the bull trap, then biggest crash coming. Wait, if this is bull trap, then biggest crash coming. Then which pairs will I trade if crypto gone? Because I only trade crypto? I don't know what you're saying. It sounds like if you think the markets are all going to crash, then the pair that you want is you want to be buying stables, right? Stable coins, fiat. What's up, brother nature? Bitcoin likes to top November on the new moon. That's until proven otherwise. I guess I should get off of this chart because this chart's broken. I had so many other charts I could have shown. I was gonna like talk about, well, or are we looking at total? Should we do all of what we just did and apply it to total? I think you end up seeing very similar stuff. Because there's validity to that, why would you not look at total? The only reason that I choose Bitcoin over total, because I think we should use total, but the only reason I use Bitcoin is because total doesn't go back for no real reason. And I guess it's just when they started, you know, doing the API, doing the data, is total only goes to February 14. There were different coins before then. Total should reflect almost just Bitcoin's market cap, before 2014. Plus whatever else, you know. Litecoin was in 14, Doge was in 14. What else? Yeah, like Purecoin, we had Feathercoin. We had like a bunch of ramp shit. That's why I don't use it, honestly. I wish it did go all the way back, because then I would use it. Let's pull up just a normal, or just like a normal Bitcoin chart, not BLX. Might close it. The C. BT to the C, here it comes. Oh, that's an old chart. I pull this up. What's on here? When was this from? A long ass time ago. Wow, when was this from? No way it was from April. It wasn't from April. I mean, it might have been from April, but there's no way that I didn't update that since April. Or did it? Or did it? Hold up. Here we go. That is this chart. That's cool. Okay, so it wasn't April. It was May. That's kind of cool. That's this chart. BTC 2023 April. May 3rd, 2023. What's going on then? Look at me getting mad distracted. What? Well, I guess that's not even that crazy. I could pretend like that's the craziest thing ever, right? But this is just based on the 4-year cycle. Like, see, it was based on the 4-year cycle, and then also of the previous 2019 rally, pullback, break all-time high, go. We never got it. Weird. That's kind of fire, though. We didn't get this part. Come on. Come on. All right. Let's just leave this up while I see what the reactions were to the chat and everything. Let's see. To the chat, to the chart, Bitcoin like top of November? Yes. Do you think the cycle could have hit its high last December? Pedo 12 Paul. Bro, this is another example of exactly why this tag stuff is not the best. Like, Paul, I know in my heart of heart that PDO 12 Paul was not what you intended to be known as in the live chat. And I know that isn't reflective of Paul. Could have hit last December. So that was also something I was going to talk about. Is there is like arguments, and I saw Nick Sasbo, I think, is one on Twitter. There's arguments about kind of that idea, right? We saw Bitcoin in many different pairs break all-time high in December of last year, and in those pairs, like against gold, has not gone higher. That high was in the December 16th of last year, not gone higher. What would be interesting is maybe that would be another argument to this like shortening cycle type thing. I think SPY BTC, is it SPY BTC? This one has continued to set higher highs, right? Oh, this is money supply. Versus money supply, we've hit higher highs this year. Versus SP, we've hit higher highs. It's really what? It's really just against gold we haven't. What's interesting is that's also like when people got very excited about alts very briefly. That was when we saw XRP break all-time high, when we saw kind of the fake out alt season. I don't think dominance is another chart I thought would be important in this discussion, but man, I don't know. I went down some rabbit holes. I thought it was fun, and I don't want to go too hard. That was like a mini alt season, right? I would say, you know, of course, we'll only know in hindsight. I would say, though, that dominance Dominance continued running, which would be bear market, but it ran this whole time. Maybe this is the puzzle piece that I should have brought in and didn't to this discussion today. Is an important chart, dominance, obviously. Very important. And I could have made a 3-hour video about Bitcoin dominance and capitalized on Ben Cohen. No, it's like we could use this in relation to the cycle highs, but I would argue that then it doesn't really fit that well again. Like almost nothing fits well, right? The only things we've seen is 2 periods of dominance where they fall, and that was going into the top of 2017 and going into the top of 2021. And then all of this is just not the same. Since the bottom, since the bear market bottom, dominance has risen, which is very weird. Right here was the cycle high. It was 2021, 60 whatever K. Dominance bumped a little bit going into June, but really hit its lowest point at the bottom of the bear market. Which is actually, this is cool. Now I'm saying it out loud. I also didn't really conceptualize this. Dominance hit its lowest point last cycle at the literal bottom of the bear market, September 22. It's like FTX, all that stuff. That is the exact opposite of what happened in 2017 and 2018. Dominance hit its lowest point actually at January of 2018, which is by all means the very top, right? Bitcoin's top was like in December of 17, but very early January 18 was the lowest point in dominance. So that was the bull market top. And then last cycle, it was actually the bear market bottom. That we saw dominance at its lowest point. That could be an argument that dominance is going to fall, and we still will see a bull market top. That hasn't happened yet, right? We could say alternating. I know I've heard Cohen say something about alternating. I just didn't ever look at it this way. I think that we don't have enough data to say alternating. We simply have a bull market top, a bear market bottom. You know, that 2 is not a pattern of any kind. We could still see this fall into the bear market bottom or something, right? Interesting. But this could be incorporated and probably should be considered when looking at the cycles. I think I was getting off on the cycle in December. December's high. Oh yeah, so these are the other charts I was looking at. So was the cycle high actually in December of last year? If that is true, and we have to look at specific charts and we have to kind of find this data. If that is true, then the 4-year cycle completely broken. Completely broken. We saw all-time high before halving, and then we saw the cycle top in the same year as the halving. That would be very interesting. God, I hope that's not true. God, I hope that's not right. We will find out. I don't think so. But there is reason. You know, it's not just pulling it out of your ass. You look at the different pairs. We've talked about this a lot. Bitcoin Euro. Really, Bitcoin Euro did hit its all-time high last year, or in January of this year, whatever. You know, basically last year, and really didn't do anything since. Very, very briefly, and by very, very small percents, not even a single percent, broke that in October. Was it October? Yeah, in early October, but like not even enough for it to really count. Like this is just a liquidity sweep at that point. Maybe an argument that can be compelling to the cycle topped last year or the very, very beginning of this year. We see that reflected not in the GBP, not in the British pound. The British pound did have all-time highs, but you might even make the same argument of these are barely all-time highs. Bitcoin has never really in its history seen price action like this, where we have all-time highs and they are, you know, again, arguably not even all-time highs because they're just fractions of percents higher. That's really never happened. You can look back and you'll see that every time Bitcoin broke all-time high in the past, it just went on rippers. Like it went up many percents, oftentimes like doubling quickly. But GBP, it isn't backing up quite as good as the euro on that. But it's still, I think you could still use this as an argument. It just barely broke all-time highs. Barely. The Swiss franc, actually the Swiss franc might even be the best one. Swiss franc still really didn't break all-time high. It did by, I don't know, $1, right? I would count these more as like a double top than all-time highs. These three major pairs, these are all pairs in the Dixie. These are all in the weighted basket that basically dictates the dollar's strength or weakness. All of them showing we really haven't had all-time highs this year. I don't know if this is true if we look at like Ethereum. I wonder if that's true if you look at Ethereum against the euro. I've never done that. That could be kind of cool. Should we do that? Check out Ethereum versus these. I think that'd be cool. I imagine though they look kind of similar. But anyway, these are arguably in favor of saying that. I'm gonna kind of take all these ideas because I'm getting ADD. You take all these ideas, put them back in. Again, the way it looks at this moment, possible. These things could be arguments for it. But the first 30, 40 minutes of this stream, we talked about these 4-year cycles and logically when we would look to see the highest point. And that time has not come yet, or we're at the footsteps of that time. We still have a few more months. It makes more sense to expect all-time highs in the next few months than it does to say, well, these didn't break all-time high and they won't. I think what happens, this is my personal opinion now, take it with a grain of salt, is when we get that final push, when Bitcoin makes a move into this fourth quarter, these pairs all break. We see the Swiss franc break above 99.3, heads into the 100 somethings. Euro breaks 106, moves to like 120, whatever. GBP actually already did, but same thing, moves above 100, etc. The Bitcoin gold pair bounces. You know, this is a really cool tweet I had recently. Follow me on Twitter, or maybe you're watching on Twitter. But maybe gold, this pair, maybe is bottom tier, and on that last bump into the end of this quarter, we see this break too, right? And then all of a sudden, all of these things just look exactly the way we would expect them to if we looked at a 4-year cycle. Without a move at the end of this quarter, then things are very different, and we probably should re-examine the 4-year cycle and what that means. I should have shown this chart. This chart's cool as hell. Someone on Twitter was like, you just put that trend line there and you could just move it anywhere. You guys remember this trend line? It's the same 2 points. July 17 on the weekly and January 28th on the weekly, right? You remember these points? If you go to BTC.D and you do the same thing, and we're snapping, we're using the magnet tool here because we don't F around. I don't want to destroy this beautiful chart. This historic crown chart. I'm going to make a copy. If you go back and you do the same thing on BTC.USD, which we've done many a time here, on Coinbase, go to Coinbase. You get something pretty cool. This was an argument. This is a reason that we thought that the bear market was over into 2023 right in the beginning. If you take these same points, and I'm going to make sure they're perfect because I don't mess around. I don't get sloppy charts. I don't make sloppy charts. You snap them using that magnet tool. What do you get? You get a very, very clear, crisp trend line. Watch this. 2020 COVID crash. Yes, you have wicks below, but look at those weeklies. Look what happens on them. They snap right back up above that line. Draw it out. You move away. And then what happens? Boom, right here. 2022. This was a huge factor in us saying that the bear market bottom was in. This trend line. We touched it in November. Never came back. It's the exact same lines. They're not arbitrary. What's kind of cool is, will we ever touch this line again? Probably. Eventually. It may even be where the next bear market is. I hope not. I hope not. I hope we don't come back to this line. We'd have to move very quickly up to escape this line forever. But as of right now, if we look at that line, go right below the weekly, gives us a not so crazy bear market bottom target, right? 51.5. That's if it literally today, flash crash down. 51.8. You know what, let's do this. This is cool because now we have like a date to use for these theoretical charts. November 2026. Let's use the bear market bottom. November 2026. Keep that here. November 26. What about that? 81 too. That would be strange. It would be strange if the top was in now. It's like the bear market was only 35%. Maybe this is another argument, another factor of that other move up. I think it's pretty safe to say, especially if the top is in, but you know, if the top is in especially, but it's safe to say that the downside is likely to be less in this cycle than it was in 17 or 15, because we saw that in the last cycle, the high was less, the diminishing returns, but also the downside was significantly less. It was only 76% versus 86+%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. So let's do the same thing. Let's do 77, 75. Where would we have to be for 75% for 81? Damn, very high. That would be awesome. If we had a 65, we'll go, yeah, let's do 65, even though this is kind of crazy math. Let's do 65% down. The last top to bottom was 75. The one before that was 85. The one before that was like 94. Yeah, about 10% less. Let's do 65-ish. In order to retrace 65-ish%, we'd have to be up here. I don't think it's impossible. We're going to 250K. I don't know when. I wouldn't be surprised if we did do that. It feels like it's impossible. That's what I like about it. But we'd have to be all the way up here just to see a movement back to that line for a smaller percent retrace than the previous markets. It's kind of cool. Let's go back. Let's do one more, and then let's do one more thing here. So bull top, let's say. Now we're doing some hopium. For those of you tuning in, you missed it. You're not gonna have the context of this. We're doing some hopium, but this is kind of cool, and I want to do it. So it's my show. You just got tough through it. Boom. Down to, what was it, 86? 86? I'm gonna move this over here so I can see it while I do this. 255. I would be very happy with this. I'd be very happy with this outcome. 255 down to 81. 2. Air market bomb, the new all-time high. This is where it gets even this is where it gets even less in, attached to reality. Is this area? Let's do it like that. That'd be crazy. What would that do? This would be such a fucking crazy series of events if we rallied to 255K in the before the start of next year. It doesn't have to be November, but the start of next year. So in this quarter,